This chapter is a follow-up to doing the dietary analysis and how you make some adjustments about nutritional recommendations after you do the dietary analysis. There are some parts in this chapter that I do not want to emphasize, and I want to encourage you not to emphasize if you are going to be working with your athletes as well, and we'll get to that part as we move forward. Weight is always an issue for just about everyone, but in particular, it's going to be a common concern for many athletes simply because certain athletic endeavors are very focused on aesthetics or what a person looks like. So there are points for aesthetics for gymnasts. There are points in competition for figure skaters, but there's also a real aesthetic to dancing as well. So that aesthetics and body image does come into play. Performance, there's a clear understanding that excess body fat is probably not going to make somebody run faster or generate more power. So there is a performance component to it. But there's also certain sports that have a weight classification. Automatically think of boxing, wrestling. Those two come to my forefront immediately. So weight concerns are potentially going to be on your athlete's mind, and it is something that is necessary to talk about. Changes in body composition would be what we would want primarily when somebody is either gaining or losing weight. It would be most likely to increase muscle mass because that is what's going to generate power, force, speed, strength, and decreasing fat mass would be the other complementary change. Most athletes are not struggling with obesity, but there are, in comparison to what the general population is. When you look at this list of athletes, these are just a small sample of those that are at risk for obesity, and I automatically go dig way, way deep in my mind at the refrigerator for the Chicago Bears. And so football players, the bigger they are, the better, the more powerful they are to knock somebody down, right? So there's become a real drive for certain athletes to be really large and to have massive amount of massive weights. Sumo wrestling is not probably going to cross you in your coaching career, but that would be another one as well. There are a lot of causes of obesity, and primarily you can say that the genetic contribution is going to be relatively small. However, we're finding more and more that there's not just a specific gene, but there is a predisposition to obesity. There are a number of factors that fall into play with obesity, and as you look at this list and you do your reading, we want to focus on some of the psychological components, the social cultural influences that are potentially going to influence our athletes with wanting to change their body mass. We know that obesity is going to have increased risk of disease, and that's morbidity. Increased mortality is death. Now, for determined weight status, you're going to get a lot of argument about body mass index. Body mass index does have a good correlation with body fatness. However, it's not always going to be it doesn't indicate percent body fat, but it correlates with it. If somebody does have a high BMI, they tend to have a higher percent body fat, but it's not something that you can utilize by itself. So it is helpful as a screening tool, and it can be part of the collection of information when you first work with your athletes to determine what their weight status is. Body mass index is done by, it's basically a conversion or a comparison of body weight to height. So the calculation is presented in your textbook, also on this slide, or you can go to a BMI calculation in online. There are many that are available, but it is quite simple. You can see that you have your metric calculation and then you have your non-metric calculation, which takes your body weight in pounds and inches, and you'll see you have a constant of 703 that's in there. So what body mass index does for us is it gives us a relationship to an estimate or a prediction for health, morbidity, and mortality, but it also can give us an idea of one part of the piece of puzzle for a person's, an athlete's need to change their body weight. So we don't spend a lot of time looking at this low value of less than 18.5, which is underweight. That's going to be those aesthetic sports, ballet, figure skating, gymnastics, for example, crew, anything that has that weight up. Also very lightweight boxers or wrestlers. Being extremely low in the BMI is counter performance. It's not good for performance. It's also really a problematic for long-term health. And so being excessively low is not good, and being excessively high is not a positive value. So we're looking at just getting this value as a one piece. Again, I'm being a little repetitive, one piece of the puzzle. When you have the combination of BMI and waist circumference, with men being greater than 40 inches or women greater than 35 inches with their waist measurement, we see that when we put those two together, that gives us a better indication of risk associated with obesity. So the big problem is midsection obesity, and that is going to be associated with stroke, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease, long-term chronic health. So if somebody has a large waist but also high BMI, we can get a better picture of their status of weight, if it should go up or it should be adjusted lower. So these two together are useful for looking at risk, but also to get an idea about current weight status for your athletes.